Happy Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, episode 130. Oh, do we have a great podcast for you tonight as the Devils are playing live against the Washington Capitals in Washington for the first preseason game action. But the show must go on, Nick Villano, as the State of the Fan Address is going through the live game right now. But we're streaming live on Facebook Live, Twitter Live, YouTube Live, and Twitch on the Primetime Radio Network. We got a great guest coming up about 9 p.m. Eastern, Josh Younggren of Evolving Hockey, Evolving Wild. At Evolving Wild is his Twitter handle. We're going to be talking everything about Devils. Nick, I don't want to be talking about the game because it's hard to do a podcast and watch the game, but that first line so far is so silly good.
Yeah.
We're getting a glimpse of the future.
Yeah, so 3 goals by the Devils so far this game, and all 3 have come from just absolute disgusting goals. Like highlight reel goals each and every time. So the first goal comes on just a rocket pass from Alexander Holtz, who's this game is on the line with Hughes and Sharangovich. Rocket pass to Yegor Sharangovich. Sharangovich just skates around the defender and scores. Boom, great. Oh, what a start. What a start. Just showing the skill, it's amazing. And then, not to be outdone, Jack Hughes, to start the second period, goes up to, I think it's Kepney. Just walks up to Kepney, steals the puck from him, and puts a backhand under the bar. What? A backhand under the bar, and not even just under the tie. It's not like the goalie was out of position. He put it under the corner. A ridiculous shot. If you got Jack Hughes with a better shot, Sam, and then you got Alexander Holtz going down on a 2-on-1 with one of the sickest wristers you'll ever see from a 19-year-old. I'm feeling all warm and fuzzy.
I'm flabbergasted. Those shots coming from Alexander Holtz from the circle, you know who it reminds me of? Brett Hull.
Ooh.
Just, when you get that shot off, that wrister, right-handed shot, and you're just picking your target, I mean, it almost feels like a slam dunk in a way. It just feels so good to see number 10 Alexander Holtz taking a wrister. That's his sweet spot in the circle, and this is just preseason game number 1. This is his professional NHL debut in preseason. And we're already seeing chemistry. And I know it's the first game, but my goodness, how slippery good are they? How slick are they? It's almost like that chemistry, that A-line chemistry where they know where they are at all times on the ice. And Jack Hughes' vision, if he can start, if his shot, if they have to respect Jack Hughes' shot, it opens up options everywhere for either to pass to, because you have to respect him as a shooter. It's going to open up the game for him.
And that's the thing. And you, Sam, this is perfect. You hit the nail right on the head, because it's not about it. Jack Hughes is always going to be able to make his own opportunities. He is that skilled of a player. He has just something about him to where he can steal the puck. He has the instincts, the hockey IQ, whatever you want to call it, that he's going to get the puck on his stick by himself and he's going to make his own shot. That's not where we need to see the best of Jack Hughes. The best of Jack Hughes we need to see when he sends the puck towards the net. Because that, like you said, I know that Jack Hughes can be a playmaker and he can make his own plays, and teams can adjust to that. What they can't adjust to is if he can also shoot the puck. So if he's coming down on a 2-on-1, you want them to respect the shot because then it opens up the door for whoever his winger is. When he's sitting in the corner on the power play and he gets the puck, you want them to respect the shot because then a player is going to go towards him and then he'll have the pass. You always want them to respect the shot, and I don't think that happened last season. There wasn't a lot of respect on his shot. They focused more on getting to passing lanes. They focused more on to breaking down his outlets. But this year, if you see a player who could put the puck in the net like that, who has the skill and the shot that he can. It doesn't matter where the goalie is. It doesn't matter where the defenseman stands. It doesn't matter what anyone does around him. He's going to score. That's next level stuff. That's stuff that, I'm not going to compare him to like the Connor McDavids of the world or things like that, but that's definitely something that Leon Draisaitl could do. That's definitely something that a lot of the other stars in this league can do. And that's what makes them stars. That's what makes them stand out above, those top 10 players. That's what makes them stand out. And you have to give credit where credit is due. Jack Hughes, every offseason, is a workhorse. He comes in looking completely different, and everything that he needed to work on is always 10 times better when he comes in the next season. He needed more consistency last year, and he needed more size, and he spent 10 months working on those two things. And obviously, there were some issues with the COVID outbreak that caused him to lose some of his size, but beyond that, he came in with a lot of size, and you saw it in those first 2 weeks of the season. And then his consistency went through the roof. This season, we needed more of a finishing from him. And it's one preseason game. I don't want to lose my mind over it. But it's not like he's going to lose the skills that he's showing this game. He is showing something that it's impossible to just fake. His hockey instincts are one thing, but the fact that he can backhand a goal like that and take a shot like that, and he almost scored another one to bar down. I think I don't remember if it hit off the crossbar if it went over the net, but he got close to another one that his accuracy is laser.
Yeah, and think of Jack Hughes in the offensive zone. If the defense has to respect a shot, now that he's got some beef and some size to him, look at his options with this line. Alexander Holtz, if he's as good as advertised, and so far I have no reason to believe that he's not. If he has that shot at the circle in the slot area, or Sharangovich with his all-around ability, his talent to get open and take that shot. But if Jack Hughes gets in trouble, he could either shoot or kick it back out to who? Dougie Hamilton at the point? Ryan Graves at the point? PK Subban? Damon Severson? He's got vision. He's got that generational vision on the ice. And we saw that in the first and second period. And before we get ahead of ourselves, Nick, this is just an upward trend that we wanted to see when Jack Hughes first came into the league. When he first came into the league, okay, maybe we overvaluated and had really high expectations. But so far, he's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, that rookie season was just a mess.
Yeah. On so many levels.
I've said it before, but I'll say it again because it's worth bearing. He lost his captain, his star player, his heart and soul player in Blake Coleman, his general manager,
GM,
and his head coach in the same year. In the same season,
and plus the pandemic came.
Yeah, I mean, but he looked terrible before that. But there was no building off anything. There was no chemistry, and then you had and before you fired the coach was desperate, so he was putting the lines in a blender every single day. So it goes to show you that sometimes environment can really impact a player. There was one example of that this week, kind of a professional transition here. Nikita Papagayev, a player that I used to be very, very high on, is no longer a hockey player. I think he's 22 years old. He's gonna 21 or 22, but he's gonna go become a social media influencer because the hockey thing just didn't work out. That's a complete. That shows you what happens when a talented player is left to die. And, he moved around. He lived in, I think he lived in 3 countries in one calendar year one time, to between Canada, Russia, and the United States. He was trying to build something. He had a decent season one year, but then they sent him down to the EHL for the entire next year. There was just a complete and utter failure of development. That's the word I'm looking for. There it is. Came to me finally. It was just a complete and utter failure of development for Nikita Papagayev, and that happens sometimes. You're not going to bat 1,000 on prospects, there's obviously other factors involved in that, but it was just something that didn't work. And then bringing it back to our original point is that with Hughes, you had a chance to blow it. You had a chance to where he just messed up his development. You didn't let him do what he wanted to do. It seems like the Devils kind of stayed a little, I don't want to say hands off. They obviously gave him a formula, but they let him focus on what he wanted to make great. And it seemed like they were both on the same page, and he did it. He put a lot of the work in during that pandemic, that first wave of the pandemic. And, he was like, well, I have no hockey to play for 10 months. So I'm going to use this to just practice to whatever he did. And now we're seeing the fruits of that labor.
Yeah, I'm going to the YouTube live right now. The comment, Damian Rasputin. Man, they really got to work on those special teams.
Yeah. They're bad.
They're bad.
I don't know. Like, they're in regular season form. The power play looks like crap. The penalty kill looks terrible. Jonathan Bernier don't look so great, which is concerning. It's the first game. I'm not that concerned about it, but it's not my favorite outcome. I wish Jonathan Bernier looked a little bit better, but
yeah,
I'm not going to overreact to the goalie. Obviously the elephant in the room, and it's going to be the elephant in the room for as long as it is the elephant in the room, is Mackenzie Blackwood announcing that he's the one player that's unvaccinated. I don't want to get into it because it's been a year. Everybody knows the facts whether they want them. I can go back and forth with people if you want. If you want legitimate information, go on my DMs. I have it because, it's my day job. But most people have made up their mind. And if he has a legitimate health reason that's going to pause it, cool. But usually getting COVID is worse for that health reason than not. So the point is, whatever. He might have antibodies still, so great, yada, yada, yada. Moving on past that point, the real point here is that there's pressure on the NBA and the NBA arenas because they said that only the home team has to be vaccinated. And now there's pressure on them saying, well, that's not fair. It doesn't make sense that the away team could have unvaccinated players and we can't have unvaccinated players. What people think that's going to do is make New York reverse course and say everyone could have unvaccinated players. No, what that's going to do is they're going to go the other way and say that nobody can have unvaccinated players. So what that would mean is that you lose Mackenzie Blackwood for every Rangers game at Madison Square Garden. I don't know if those rules apply for Long Island. I had to do a little bit more research on that. But I know that he wouldn't be able to play against the New York Rangers. And then that becomes a problem because right now the Devils have one game in Canada in the 2021 calendar year. You don't need Mackenzie Blackwood for that game. You can survive without him. But if he can't play the Rangers on the road and he's your starting goalie, and based on the results of tonight's game, you got to hope he is. He absolutely positively has to make a decision for the team. it's not a decision for him anymore if that becomes the case. Right now, he can play around with the decision. There's one game in December against the Jets. Jonathan Bernier could very easily make that trip, and then he could join the team, for the rest of the road trip, whatever. And then I think we play the Canadians in January is the next one. But and then there's a couple road trips in Canada in March. So that's when the next time it becomes. I don't want to say dire. I don't want to use that kind of language, but that's the next time that it's going to. That's the next time you're probably playing Scott Wedgwood, is what I'm saying. And if he can't go to Madison Square Garden, if that rule changes, and something in my gut says it might, that's where it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, well said. You put out a pretty nice article on pucksandpitchforks.com earlier this week, about that. I was reading through, and we'll see what happens, right?
I'm not here to pressure anybody anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to shame anybody. I will say most of the people who have the wrong information either ran with something that they heard one person say and didn't see the update, which is not their fault. Ignorance is a word that we use as a negative, and ignorance is just an existence of life. Like, people don't read. Oh, are you trying to say that are you trying to talk, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to talk because I need to get to this.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is important because I've seen this all over the internet. Tim Clark Callahan writes, Nick, you ain't in New Jersey. How are you going to watch the games with no NHL TV?
Well, most of the games are going to be on ESPN Plus, but I'm not going to reveal my sources.
I'm not an out-of-towner. I'm not out-of-towner.
I mean, my whole family lives in New Jersey, and that gives me access to games. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Between my sister and my mom and mirror casting and all that. So.
And then we got the Comcast issue. You got the Comcast
let's talk about the
Xfinity
Comcast issue. Let's talk about the Comcast.
Yeah.
I'm sick of talking about vaccination. Let's talk about the Comcast issue.
All right. So I talked about this on pregame. I know Cheryl Miller is, concerned. I even joked around, but I shouldn't even be joking around. It's like, this is going to, the fans are going to find it, and it's not going to be the right way. Because Devils fans especially are hardcore, and, these big conglomerates just get a deal done. It's not hard. Just, don't get too greedy here. I don't know. I mean, right now, I have Comcast Business right now. I get my TV service through that whole DirecTV online. It seems to work pretty well. But I'm in the local area. I'm not the outside. I don't know. And I just hate it when this happens all the time, where access to our favorite teams is limited. It shouldn't be limited. How are you going to stay connected to your team? You always want to stay connected to the New Jersey Devils 24/7, 365. That's why they have a content team. That's why they have this, that. That's why they have silly contests. But
I'm going to say something that might sound controversial, but it's not.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
The worst.
We need ratings right now.
The worst contract that Lou Lamoriello signed was the one he signed with MSG. And I love the MSG content people. I love Bryce. I love Dano and Steve Kanji. We love Eric, obviously. We love everybody. They do a good job with the backstage stuff. They make it they make the broadcasts fun. They do a lot of interesting stuff on the intermissions. The intermission report is always something I don't need to turn away from. But the amount of money that the Devils have lost over the years because they have not been able to renegotiate their local rights And the fact that you keep running into this. And what happens when you run into this, Sam, is say the Devils were on, the S Network. If Comcast is fighting with the Rangers and Islanders broadcast team, well, now people are going to need to find an alternative. And maybe kids start watching with their dad some Devils games just to watch some hockey. And those kids start to like what they see during these things. It's that simple that you can get fans that quickly. One turn of a hat. Why did we become Devils fans instead of Rangers fans? I became a Devils fan because I wasn't that into hockey in 1994, and I was really into hockey in 1995. And the Devils won that year, and they're in New Jersey, and I probably would have gravitated to the one New Jersey team because I love my home state, and I love the state in which I'm a native to. But, that's how I got into it. I got into hockey because New Jersey was in the Stanley Cup final. But New York was in the Stanley Cup final the year before, and I didn't become a Rangers fan. Fandom is so stupid. So stupid. Everybody, people know that I'm a New England Patriots fan. Do you know why I'm a New England Patriots fan, Sam?
The pink jerseys?
No. Because I was mad as a child that the Jets and the Giants played in New Jersey but called themselves New York. So I needed a new team, and I beat my cousin in NFL Blitz. It's that dumb. My mom bought me a Drew Bledsoe jersey, and that's it. It's the luckiest video game win of my life.
Wow.
Wow.
I've heard some strange stories. It really does. Sometimes I wonder why I'm still a Mets fan. We've been over this. Yeah. I mean, when you have competition, you've got the New York Yankees, who's pretty much next door, and all it takes is one click on your remote to go to a winning team instead of watching that disaster dumpster fire pretty much every year. I mean, we went through, the Wilpons, they used to be called the Coupons, and now you got a new owner thinking you turn the corner and the season's over. Right? So I don't know. I can't explain fandom. I can't explain any of this. Most people don't know this, but I was interviewed today. Did I tell you about my interview today? Not
you
job
didn't tell
interview.
Me, no.
Oh, I got interviewed by this media company that services all the major newspaper outlets in northern Jersey because he wanted to hear about my story. My story about the PA announce and all that, and I forwarded the articles that about my journey at pucksandpitchforks.com. If you haven't read it yet, go there, click on it, read. And he's like, "Oh, thank you very much for all the information, all that." And we started talking, and I told him how I became a Devils fan. I'll tell the story again. Back in the day, my town did not have cable. And the only thing that was on TV, hockey was on TV at that time period, back in the mid-'80s, were the New York Rangers on WWOR Channel 9. Rabbit Ears. And
I remember. Did you have the really hard to turn? The boom.
Yes.
Boom.
Yes. Tinfoil rabbit ear TV antenna, Channel 9, and watching the Rangers lose every game as a 7-year-old. And I started to learn how to read at that age, maybe third grade. I could put letters into a word, and I would look in the newspaper in the Star Ledger. I'm like, look at the standings. There is a team called the New Jersey Devils, and I live in Jersey. I'm going to cheer for that team. I knew nothing about the team as a 7-8-year-old. But I knew how to turn the dial to 770 AM to listen to the games, and that's how I started. And then Sherry Ross came first tour of duty. She was a color commentator way back when. And that's how I became a Devils fan. And then the 90s came and the Devils-Rangers rivalry was so heated, I was telling them, I was like, because there were more Ranger fans than Devils fans in New Jersey at that time period. A lot of it had to do with the Rangers been around since the 20s, only winning just a couple cups. Or the Devils in '82. But I said the reason why there were more Ranger fans really is because our parents were cheap, and MSG was on basic cable, and the Devils were on Sports Channel, and you had to pay $9.95 just to back then watch a crappy team. That's why there were more Ranger fans than Devils fans. You got to stay connected with the fans, New Jersey.
Yeah. So this Comcast thing needs to get fixed. Like, you can't start the regular season. You can't start the regular season where, and I don't, and then like, people are watching on MSG Go or I think the MSG Go. Are their logins going to stop working? Is that how you're going to do these people? Like, this is.
You know what? I don't know. Oh, I never even thought about that. Right? I'm telling you, you know what? The young generations, the millennials, what's under the millennials? I don't know. Isn't there like Generation Y? I don't even know what it is. Just basically, if you're under 40 years old, trust me, someone's going to be streaming it somewhere, and it's going to be this website address that I've never heard of before. It's going to be like, I don't know, emu457.com, and somehow I could get the Devils game, right? All right, so we have a special guest. He's in the green room right now. He's adjusting his camera. I think he should adjust his camera just a little bit lower before we get him on air as he's adjusting in the green room. He's from evolving-hockey.com. You can find him on Twitter at evolvingwild. His name is Josh Younggren, a friend of the podcast. Josh, welcome to the Primetime Radio Virtual Studio. How are you tonight? Oh, I have him muted. Crap.
Adjusted over here. I don't do this the whole video thing very often, so we're still getting kind of used to it. But
we're a special bunch over here. You're now a friend of the podcast. This is you're a multiple-time guest.
Yeah, this is the second time, I think, right? Except the first time I didn't. I wasn't on video, so this is my first video. I don't do also, as you can see, probably when I was in the green room, that I was also kind of having to get my lighting adjusted and whatnot and kind of get set up so I could do video because I don't do it very often. But thank you for having me. Yes, I am Josh from evolving-hockey.com at evolvingwild on Twitter. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and Josh, I'm just going to jump right into it because we had to have you on when I saw you put out the point projections. And people were trying to eviscerate you on Twitter, and I wanted to have your back. Devils fans have to have each other's backs, and you're a big Devils fan now. It looks like you have them. Your projections have them at 98 points in the standings. Good for third. That means guaranteed playoff spot in the Metropolitan Division. So, yeah. Josh, I am glowing. I am so happy. But tell us why you have the Devils and 65% playoff percent. You gotta explain this to me.
Yeah. So first thing I'll say is I think with these projections, I'm not sure if you want me to get too technical into kind of how they work, but I'd be happy to kind of go a little bit more into detail. But there is a bit of I think it's hard to on Twitter specifically to I think have the kind of nuance for some of these things where I think the overall rating is definitely what people look at in terms of the ranking, but also there's a lot of wiggle room, I think, in terms of the overall uncertainty here. But yes, we do currently have the Devils as third in the Metro. I think the Metro in general generally within a lot of the divisions, I think it's maybe better to think about the middle teams kind of all being close together. So in general, yes, we have the Devils at 98 points above the Islanders and Rangers at 95. Now, this is kind of also a joke that I think some of the more stat-heavy people have is it's been several years now where a lot of the projection systems are very under on the Islanders. And generally the Islanders overperform, which I think is kind of now become a trend. It's almost like a bit of an in-joke among people who do these projections. It's like, well, yeah, we're under on the Islanders. We're probably going to miss there. But I think with the Devils, I can jump into it. I really do think, looking kind of over our rankings and also like our ratings for the players, is that number one, the acquisition of Dougie Hamilton really helped the Devils in terms of the overall ratings. He, from a lot of our stuff, is ranked in as a top 3 defenseman going into next year, kind of up there with Makar and McAvoy from a lot of our stuff that we do. And Hamilton is just, he was kind of, in free agency, he was kind of the number one big UFA, I think, for a lot of people. And just getting Hamilton on the team really does improve the Devils overall. Also, I think, secondly, just Jack Hughes is really kind of coming into his own. And a lot of our projection systems currently, both for the team projections, but also for player ratings, really like Jack Hughes heading into next year. I think he ranks out in terms of a profile. I think, is he still 20? I'm not quite sure exactly on age, but just a player like that, who's that young, who had the kind of season he did last year, really does project well in a lot of the stuff that we do. And so I would say those are the two things. And also, honestly, I don't know, we kind of had some tweets about this in the offseason, but honestly, Tatar was a great pickup, I think, for the Devils. And I don't think a lot of, he was kind of one of our under the radar projected players. And I thought it was kind of interesting when, pretty sure he wasn't signed immediately. And he's a player that, even though he's kind of had a bit of a, I don't know what you want to call it, kind of a shaky history in terms of he's bounced around a couple teams, he still ranks out really well. And so I think the Devils just added a couple really great players this offseason, and they also just have some young players that are coming into their own with Hughes. And I'm not the biggest East Coast fan, but is it Sharon Govich?
That's what I think it is.
I struggle with names. We've joked about this on our own podcast about how a lot of the time I just see the names and then I don't hear them because I'm not watching all of the games all the time, so I don't really know of them. But I think the Devils, in terms of just their overall makeup, they compared to some of the other Metro teams, I don't think their roster is they don't currently have as many players that are weak compared to some of the other teams in the Metro. And they've also just added a lot of, several good players this offseason, which really definitely helps them overall.
Josh, I'm somebody who famously is terrible at names and am constantly saying them wrong. And then, people will fix it on the thing. But I felt better tonight because Jonas Siegenthaler played years for the Washington Capitals, and they called him Jonas for all those years. And tonight he informed them that his name is Jonas. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm not the problem here. Maybe it's just everybody kind of just needs to figure out names.
Yeah, every year it seems like there's a player that has been called something, and then they come out and say that their name is this other way, and it's always kind of it makes me feel like, well, if we don't even really know about some of these players anyway, so you just kind of guess, at least you know who they are. You're aware of them, and then you'll figure out the pronunciation later.
Yeah, I feel like that they were young and they just kind of let something go, and they're like, all right, whatever, that's what you want to call me. I could care less. I'm going to go score goals. And then eventually, this is kind of annoying after 4 years. So this is my name. But anyway, I do want to focus on Jack Hughes because he's he's obviously the big star, and he showed it tonight. I don't know if you saw his goal, but it was disgusting. He did it exactly how you want him to do it. A takeaway in the offensive zone and just a nasty finish under the bar. Are you projecting, I feel like for him to take that next step, a finishing element to his game has to be there. Is that what your projections say is coming? Do you think that he's going to become more of a goal scorer, or do you think he's just going to make people around him that much better that he doesn't need to be?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to in that way. He only has 2 NHL seasons. A lot of our projection systems don't take into account prospect data or any of the minor league stuff, I guess, or junior league stuff. I would say that it's right now hard to really say, but at least last year, one of the big steps we saw from Hughes, at least from a lot of the kind of the models that we have, is really a jump in his defensive play. Now, this year, now that we're Devils fans and they're our team, I will say as an aside, the joke we have on Twitter a little bit is every year when we release these projection systems, there's always seems to be one team that we're higher on than either the fan consensus or the general kind of, I don't know, the way media is talking about teams. And last year was the Habs, the Canadians we had above the Leafs in the standings, which was very spicy at the time. I thought it was kind of funny. They didn't quite do that great in the regular season, but then obviously they had a pretty good playoffs. But that's why we're joking about the Devils, is that's kind of they're the team that we got called out a lot for, as the one that we were like, kind of over projected on. I think in terms of Hughes, what we're seeing right now though is just the overall growth in his defensive play, which I think is something that my point was is that I don't have a lot of experience watching Hughes, so I'm not quite sure if that showed up last year, but at least from our models, they really did show up, or they did like his defensive game. I think that in terms of to your question, the shooting aspect, I would have to go, I think, dig into it a little bit more. I think it's in general right now, it's just overall the projections, like just his age and also just his growth over the last 2 years is something that I think is very comparable to a lot of young players who really turn into kind of elite players as they get into their prime, because he's still young and he still has a couple more years until he maybe really does hit his peak. And so that's kind of what we're seeing right now. But then also just it does seem like now defensive play overall is a little bit more variable, and there's a lot more uncertainty around it year over year. But right now we're just projecting that a lot of his value actually is coming on the defensive end of the game, and kind of just ability to limit chances and scoring, and high event shots and that kind of thing. So,
and I don't want to cut you off, but I do have to say that Dawson Mercer just scored, which is something that a lot of people are very interested in. Alexander Holtz and Dawson Mercer scoring the same night, so it's just it's a very good night for the Devils fans. It's preseason, so like our special teams still suck. That's kind of annoying, but to see Hughes, Holtz, and Mercer score, and then the next guy I want to talk about with you, because I'm curious of how your models are going to equate this guy, is Igor Sharangovich. He looks stupid. He looks so much better. I watched him as he tried to literally lift Belarus into the Olympics by himself. And, just watching him in training camp and in these scrimmages, he looks so much better than everyone. And I'm confused of like, did the league really just miss on somebody who's going to be a superstar, or what's, what? And then I want to know, there's 1 year of data that you have on him. How does that equate?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. And we were kind of talking about this also with, like, I think the 1 year players are in general, like so a little background for us, Luke and I. So my brother and I we're twins. We run our site together, and we do a lot of this stuff kind of in tandem, just different things here and there. And I think 1 year players are something that we've worked with a lot in terms of like, how do we work with them and what do we do in terms, because generally with a player in terms of projection system, you like to have like 3 years of kind of previous NHL experience. That gives you kind of the best way, or the best, I guess, solid footing to maybe make a kind of projection system around. 1 year players though are really interesting, and we were talking about this with Kaprizov as well, as specifically as not a super young player. I know Sharangovich is younger than Kaprizov, but I think in terms of missing, I think it's hard to. I still think that a lot of the prospect data, or at least anything that is non-NHL data, is it's hard to deal with from a more reliable standpoint. The NHL data in general is a lot more comprehensive, and so we have a lot more that we can use to make more reliable projections. I don't, to be honest, know a lot about the history of him. I'm not quite sure exactly where, like, I know, again, this is more maybe my West Coast fandom, being a Wild fan and watching a lot of the West Coast teams. I can't really speak on to where, like, did the teams miss him, or was it something that, everybody missed on? But I would imagine it's something similar to just a player that maybe for whatever reason, when they were younger, they were just overlooked, and then they just happened to kind of, they kind of like squeaked into a role that I think was not anticipated. I think, but in terms of the projections for Sharangovich, we have him currently as ranked, like, I think let me just look. I think he's like among all players, including goalies, I think we have him as the 5th highest player in terms of like impact for the Devils next year. And I think that's just, if we look at just the 1 year he had and kind of his other attributes, I think he does grade out really well. Now, I think that we kind of always need to take that with a grain of salt when it comes to 1 year players. I was kind of saying this about Kaprizov as well, is even though obviously he looks fantastic, right? there's a lot of players who have like especially in a shortened season, there's a lot of uncertainty there, and I would caution like looking at that. Now, what we know about him is that he ranks really well, and he had a great year last year, and kind of just the way he grades out from a projection system, the model likes him. But I'm kind of like dodging the question here a little bit. I think it's more that it's hard to say one way or the other exactly what we're thinking kind of overall, I think.
Yeah. So one player we have a ton of data on is Dougie Hamilton, and I think the most curious question, I don't think you're worried too much, or I don't think anybody's really worried about his production himself. I think the thing I'm more worried about is kind of who he plays with. And I'm curious if you do you have an opinion on, like, does the model look at like, or first of all, does the model try to predict who he's going to play with? Like, does it predict like, oh, he's probably going to play with Ryan Graves, or he's going to probably play, or is it just very singular?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think we've had some questions about that with the Kraken as well, in terms of just like chemistry or coaching or lineup construction in general. The models generally they take into account. So let's see, I don't want to get too technical here, because we don't have a ton of time. I could go into this for a while, but the models themselves that we use to project the future evaluation or future number, they're already kind of accounting for these things. So what we generally want to do is account for, try to, what Michael Blake McCurdy is kind of called isolate. We want to isolate players on their own, which is what the models in general are trying to do, is to account for all the players that a player has played with and also who they're playing against. And then kind of some other things like where they're starting and what their usage is and how coaches, like what kind of, zone starts they're getting, those kind of things. And so we kind of already account for those in the past numbers. And so then when we use those to project them, I think that we get a certain amount of stability in terms of like where we expect them to play. And it's because we're already kind of we're not fully isolating them on their own, because I don't think we have enough, data to do that, to be honest. But we're getting a pretty good idea about how they function just on their own. And I think that is I think the idea is to try and get a neutral idea that doesn't have any kind of impact that we maybe can't foresee. So I think with Hamilton, just because his results have been so good in the last, actually forever. I mean, I know that he's also kind of bounced around, but in Calgary and then in Carolina, he was just fantastic. And I think that just with that kind of player, even though he is kind of like starting to maybe get he still has several good years, I would say, but he's also getting kind of close to that end of the late 20s. So it's not like something that you should expect to continue forever. I mean, I think when he gets into his 30s, obviously, I think there's going to be some age impact there. But I think in general, I would say with a player like that, who's been as consistent as he has, I would probably say that it's not really going to matter who he plays with. Now, obviously, that's kind of from a statistical standpoint I'm talking. Obviously, there are some other chemistry aspects. There's some other team construction aspects that I'm not really taking into account. But I would say that in general, he's just the kind of player that is just that good, and it probably isn't going to matter too much about who he plays with on his pair.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's good, because I don't think they know who he's going to play with on his pair. I think they're just kind of like,
Well, I was going to ask, Yeah, I was going to ask you this right now. We use Cap Friendly kind of as our general place for roster, just to get the depth charts and to get ideas about where rosters are. And I think they currently have him on a pair with Ty Smith. I'm not really sure if that's actual where he'll actually end up, but we don't, a lot of the time with some of the way the projection system is set up, it's not, some other people do it differently, but we found actually that just like kind of accounting for time on ice we bake that in a different way. So it doesn't really matter in our system if he's a first pair or a second pair. Obviously somebody like Hamilton is going to be a first pair, but if somebody else plays there instead of Ty Smith, there'll be obviously a different for some projection systems, but I'm not quite sure if is it really very much up in the air? I mean, it didn't look like he was in the preseason game tonight, is he?
He's not in the game tonight, and I really don't think they're going to break up Severson and Smith, because Smith grew so much with Severson. Severson struggled towards the end of the season, but Smith at least is the guy they're really worried about. So I think they're going to keep them together and then work around that. I think it's more likely that Graves is the front runner, then there's some outside, possibilities that they put a lesser guy or a younger guy like a Kevin Ball or a Jonas Siegenthaler, who's just there to do a job.
Yeah.
But if there's if they do a 6-on-4 or a 6-on-5 situation where they need a goal, I think that's somewhere where you'll see Ty Smith and Dougie Hamilton, and that could impact stats where they're just, going all out assault trying to get a goal. I think that's probably somewhere in the, in the chamber for Lindy Ruff. So I do think that they, and that's the thing is that last year, you had PK Subban as your top line defenseman. And because he was so limited, because he's not the guy he used to be, that takes away a lot of the creativity of what the Devils could have done with lines. I think with Dougie Hamilton and with Ryan Graves head of the roster, I think now you could kind of play around with the lines. You're not stuck in a box. And I think that last year the defense was stuck in a box, and it was also bad. So, it's not good when you're in a bad box.
Yeah. I think that's definitely true. Obviously, I just think in general, I would say with a player like Hamilton, especially because he's very, he's seasoned, he's played in the NHL for a while. He's been on the other thing I think is maybe kind of interesting to think about is that Hamilton has been on now. This is his fourth team. And so he's played around with a lot of different players, and he's done that before. He kind of knows, I would assume, having gone from team to team to team, playing with different pairing and different defensemen over the years. I think the kind of player like that is one that I would generally not worry as much about in terms of like how he'll fit. I think it's maybe more about just how can you maybe optimize the overall pairings, because when you have Hamilton, maybe you don't want to put somebody who is like maybe the second best defenseman, in your group. Maybe you want to have that, you want Hamilton to play with someone. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of, I think, decisions there that are team specific that I don't feel like I really have a lot of good insight into. But overall, what I can say is that Hamilton is one of the best defensemen in the league, and he really, really helps the Devils in terms of their I think their projections or where they probably will, how they'll perform this year.
So the last question I want to ask you, specific on the Devils, before we kind of get into what you're doing for preseason, the content that Evolving Hockey is doing, is the goalie situation. So I'm not going to make you talk about. I'm not going to make you talk about the elephant in the room. But we did learn that Mackenzie Blackwood is unvaccinated, so that could impact his availability. Jonathan Bernier hasn't looked great tonight, so. How much is your model? Because I know last year I spoke to a couple people whose model liked the Devils just a little bit, and it was because of Crawford and Blackwood. And once Crawford and Blackwood was no longer a thing, the models no longer like them. So I'm curious of the impact that goalies have on your model.
Yeah, I think so. Goalie's really hard. I think in general, because year over year, obviously everyone knows this, but goalies, especially because, again, I mentioned this earlier, is that we're kind of lacking some of the more granular data that might help us kind of account for some of the things in terms of year over year play, goalie positioning, where maybe location on net, like some of the goalie angles, all these things I think that we don't have, but that's beside the point. I think from what I think the model does generally, because goalies are fairly hard to project, is it just kind of it moves a lot of them kind of closer together, and so you don't have as much disparity between the goalies overall. Now that's not always true. There are definitely some goalies in the league that are clearly like good, like Hellebuck and Vasilevsky and Saros and some of the top kind of currently players who maybe in the last 2 or 3 years have just been that good. I think in general, for kind of what we looked at, obviously Blackwood is a very good goalie. He projects out really well. I think we have him kind of as like a mid 80th percent or percentile goalie among like the league. So like a top, probably at least top 10 goalie in the league. That's kind of where he comes in. But like the other thing, and again, it's very hard. I don't like to really say anything, and we ran into this with our fantasy projections as well in terms of trying to say anything with certainty around goalies. But I think that it looks like, from what I can tell, the Devils don't really have a bad goalie per se. I even like Wedgwood, who I don't know if he'll get playing time, is kind of grades out as like an average or slightly below average goalie, which is not the worst thing that you can have on a team. I think that it's very difficult to say, but and again, I haven't. It seems like I've tried to read into this and follow the Blackwood situation, but it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of information, like in terms of like how it'll unfold and if he'll get time and how much he's going to play, all these things. And I think it's hard from a modeler or like our standpoint, for instance, to really know that. And so we kind of just, I think, kind of assume he'll probably play. And so he's in our projections for the Devils, and that could potentially drop. I would say if he isn't in net, you might see the Devils drop 2 points or so, maybe a point. I'm somewhere around there, and they might kind of just be in the general mix, tied with like the Rangers and Islanders in our system, depending on how the schedule kind of works out when, he drops out, and we're also kind of trying to account for backup goalies and whatnot. But I would say in general, the Devils goalie situation, with aside from the vaccination situation, is good. It's solid from what we can tell. But again, you could see any kind of variation in goalie performance in Blackwood. Even with, I know that he had COVID last year. He's also had all of this stuff going on off the ice in terms of just like probably dealing with, I don't know, whatever he's going through, and his whatever choices that have led, or the things that have led him to make the choice not to get vaccinated. Who knows how that will impact his year? And so I think that stuff's kind of hard, and we just kind of just say, well, we don't really know what that is. We don't know how that'll impact things.
Yeah.
But I think in general, from what we can tell, all of the kind of non-statistical things aside, the Devils look like they're pretty good in net, I would say.
Okay, well, that's good. You brought us a lot of positivity, and I appreciate that. So to reward you, we give you a platform to promote all your stuff. No, but really, I love Evolving Hockey. I love everything that you're doing with the statistics. You break them down so easily. You break them down so just judiciously, I guess. I am terrible with words right now. Apparently, it is literally my job, and I can't do it right now. But hopefully, you are better with numbers, because. But just tell everybody what you started with the projections, the point projections, and that's expanded on your website now, correct? On evolving.hockey or evolving-hockey.
Yeah. So it's not currently on the site now. We're still kind of waiting a little bit just to get final rosters. But first of all, thank you for the kind words. We really do appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's for any of your viewers or listeners. We run a site, evolving-hockey.com. We have just a lot of models and a lot of projection systems. We do contract projections. We have a lot of your standard just standard box score stuff. And it's kind of some of the standard advanced stats, all of that stuff is there. But I think in terms of our big stuff this offseason was, like you mentioned, we're currently working to get the team projections on the site. They're all done. We had our initial version. I think for the most part, rosters are kind of set, which is kind of why we wait a little bit, is that, again, the way that the projection systems work is that we have to kind of make some assumptions about what the rosters will be for the whole year. And so the best thing in general to do is try and get as close to the season where you can kind of finalize every roster for every team, and then also kind of deal with injuries. I think they're in this part of the preseason, or I guess maybe a week or two ago, it can be hard to gauge like when players will come back and players that are missing for maybe 2 or 3 months. So I anticipate we'll have them out maybe on the site probably the end of this week, or at the earliest or latest, I guess, probably on Monday. So we have that. We also will be having a game projection model. So if you want to just check out like what the probability from our model is on, like, say, I don't know, a random Devils game in the season day to day, we'll have all of the projections up there. And we're also going to be tracking playoff probabilities like some other sites do. And then we're kind of past this window, but the new thing for us this summer was fantasy projections. So we also do have full fantasy suite for anyone who wants to use for both points leagues and categories leagues. That was a whole wild world that we kind of found ourselves entering in. And so that was kind of fun. A lot of discourse around that, but I think that stuff can lead to some good decisions and just general debate as well. And then, I'm trying to think what else, if we have anything other stuff. I think we do plan to have, once a lot of the stuff that we do preseason, kind of heading into the season to get set up, is done during the season. One of our goals, and we thought we might have more time this summer, but we really just haven't, is to kind of start doing a series on like kind of high level articles that cover a lot of our more advanced metrics and models. I think right now, one of the things that we're lacking is just a good primer or a good overview for how some of the stuff works, because it can be very, I think it can be very daunting for people when they see just like these, RAPM and GAR and XGAR and, all of these things on the site. So one of our goals, I think, this season is to have some more explainer type stuff that helps people understand and use the stuff that's on our site, and maybe better or help people understand how they can maybe learn, or they can use them to kind of research or figure out whatever they want. So I kind of rambled there a little bit. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything, but I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely going to, we're going to have you on later in the season, because your contract projections are second to none. I've never seen anything like this before, and you had yourself a really good month because some of the contracts you hit so on the nose, it's honestly ridiculous. But we got the Jack Hughes contract coming.
Yeah, and there's still a few outstanding RFAs that we're waiting on, and I think I think in general the funny thing about the contract projection model is it's really more that GMs just kind of pay the same way year over year. Like GMs don't really look. There's not a lot of this player they played a lot of minutes and they had a lot of points and they did this other couple things and this is how old they are and this is their status. Like that's why you can get by with doing just standard comparable contracts if you want and can kind of gauge on where players come in because that's kind of how it works. But thank you for the kind words. It's fun. It's fun to do the contract projections because it's just it's a fun model I think overall and I think pretty useful for people as well.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have you on later in the season to kind of talk about that and see what where we're going with money wise and also just kind of looking at what your projections say in the middle of the season. But Josh Younggren, evolving-hockey.com. Follow him at Evolving Wild and at Evolving Hockey. Go-to source all season. Josh, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you giving some of your time to us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I promise the next time I'm on, I'll fix this lighting in here.
It took me like Josh. 10 podcasts to fix it, and I'm one of the co-hosts, so it takes a little bit.
I'm gonna have to move some stuff around in here. I'm just like in the dark. I thought it was like, oh, this will work, but it's I don't think it. I'm kind of in the backlight somehow, and I didn't really mean that. But anyway, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and yeah, I'd be happy to come on mid-season or at some point we can when the Devils are leading the Metro.
Let's go!
Great,
ready,
great.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, thank you, Josh.
Take it easy.
That is Josh Younggren of Evolving Hockey. You can find him on Twitter at Evolving Wild or evolving-hockey.com. Nick? Oh, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, you're very still. I wasn't sure on the camera feed.
Yeah, I realized that I accidentally flipped my mic all the way up. So every time I breathe, you can hear me very distinctly. So I'm trying to.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mistakes are made, Sam. I've made a mistake, so I'm trying to, hold my breath every time someone else talks.
Wow. Well, this is coming from Beer Baron on Twitter. All three first-round draft picks in 2020 have scored today.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, Shakir Mukhamadullin looks real good in Russia. You know, he got a second goal. I mean, they scored 10, so I would hope he would get in on the action when his team scores 10. But it's good to see everybody scoring. It's exciting. It's exciting. I like where the direction the Devils are going. The goalie situation is legitimately, and I'm not even talking about the vaccination. I'm just saying if Bernier doesn't play up to his level, if Mackenzie Blackwood looks more like he did down the stretch last year in the middle of the season last year than he did 2 years ago, the Devils are in a little bit more trouble. But yeah, I'll that's pretty much all I got. We got lots on the website. We got your goodbye piece. Did you want to say anything else about the PA search?
It's gonna be interesting. I've been looking at. I'm looking at the.
That's a word for it.
The final three. I'm actually secretly rooting for one, but I don't want to give that away.
No.
I don't want to give that away.
Don't give it away.
But I will say though that the process has been it's been going on for almost 2 months now, because from the first video submission when it was announced to now, it's almost about a month and a half, and they'll end at around 2 months. So, and Friday, I will be at Taj Lounge 97.3 for Game Day Live with Vinny Parisi at Tops Lounge 973. Come visit us there. Plus, you get to hear the first announcer. And, yeah, pretty cool. Alrighty, so should we end the podcast?
Yeah, and if you haven't seen the Holtz and the Hughes goals, go to pucksandpitchforks.com. I got an article with both of those goals inside of it. So take a look at those. I mean, it's hockey's back, people. Oh, wait.
Back.
Before we go, I think Nico scored.
It looks huge. Like it.
He had a pretty crappy game. So
well, yeah. It looks like it.
We really needed a Nico goal. The Capitan scoring a goal. That's a great way to go out, is with Nico Hischier scoring a goal. Everybody that you wanted to see score a goal scored a goal. Yeah, it was a huge night for us. It was a huge night for the Devils. I'm excited. pucksandpitchforks.com. There's a lot of stuff. There's also one that I'm kind of happy about. 5 mistakes that we've made in the past that we don't want to do again. That's on the pucksandpitchforks.com website. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff this weekend. I got a lot planned for this weekend because I got to do some stuff for the front page tomorrow. So look for stuff this weekend, and let's go Devils.
Let's go Devils, and stick around. I've got to set up the debut of the 2021 season. Let's go Devils post-game live. I'll be back in about 5-10 minutes. Live. Get post-game reactions. I've been watching the game while doing the podcast, multitasking. And we'll see you then. Check back in about 10 minutes. Till next time, let's go Devils.